Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about useful language to use in the kitchen. And what better way is there to learn this vocabulary than to actually bake something? So today I'm going to show you a no-knead bread recipe. It's super simple and really delicious. If you want to practice your instruction skills and listening skills, try to follow along as I bake this recipe. Otherwise, you can just listen to this. We're going to talk about common phrases that are used when cooking or baking. And at the end, you're gonna have some amazing vocabulary as well as bread. So let's start with what you're going to need. You're definitely going to need flour. You can get some extra flour as well because you need it for the recipe, but also to sprinkle on a couple surfaces. So it's good to have extra. You also need some sugar. I'm at the end, but that's okay. We only need about a teaspoon of sugar. Yeast. This one is very important. It will help your bread to rise. We also have some salt. I just keep mine in an easy Tupperware. And then you will need 2 cups of water. Make sure your water is warm or at least room temperature. We also need oil. You can use, I'm using extra virgin olive oil, but you can use any olive oil or just oil that you have. Don't worry about that. To bring everything together, we need a big spoon, some measuring cups. These ones are for liquids and these ones are for dry. I also like to have a knife handy when we're scooping. This is a great way to get rid of any excess or extra flour. And we're gonna need something to cool it on at the end. And what are we cooking it in? Well, we're going to use anything that's cast iron will work, but I recommend a Dutch oven. So here, this one's quite heavy. It's actually a cast iron Dutch oven from IKEA. You do not need one this big. It's just the only one that I have. Okay, oh, and of course we're gonna need some bowls. I just forgot to take them out. Okay, we have our bowls. So you're going to need 2 bowls. If you only have one, that's fine. I recommend get as big of a bowl as you can. So now that we have all of our ingredients, it means it's time to start baking. Let's start with our wet ingredients. You need 2 cups of water. Again, this water should be warm, not too hot, not too cold. We just want it to be at least room temperature. I recommend putting the sugar in first. Let's do 1 teaspoon of sugar and 1 packet of yeast. Okay, and then we want to give it a good stir. So just take any spoon, mix it all up. And when you're happy with it, this can just set off to the side. So for our dry ingredients, we're going to take our biggest bowl that we have. I'm gonna use this one. And we're going to add 4 cups of flour. Again, for better measurements, use a knife to get rid of any excess. Once we have our 4 cups of flour, then we're going to add some salt. So this is about a tablespoon. If you only have a teaspoon, then you're gonna do 3 teaspoons, which is about the same as 1 tablespoon. Now that we have our 2 dry ingredients together, we're just gonna mix it. But when we finish mixing, we're going to create a well. So we do this by putting the back of the spoon up against and sliding from the center to the edge. Now you might be wondering, why did we put the salt in the flour, not in the water? That's because the yeast needs to eat the sugar and feed off of that warm water that gives it energy. If I put salt in there, it can stop that from happening. So let's check on our yeast. Okay, so our yeast has some bubbles in it, which means that it's activating, it's growing, it's alive, and this is really good because we need it to do that in order to rise once we put it in the oven. Now, we have wet and dry, so we are going to combine the wet and dry ingredients. Just pour in the center of your well. Now you can use your hands for this, but if you're going to mix it, your hands will get very doughy. So I prefer to use a spoon, or a trick that I learned from YouTube is to use the back of a wooden spoon. So slowly start to combine the two. So this isn't going to look like pizza dough. Instead, it's going to have a shaggy dough. That means it's very wet and it doesn't make a perfect ball. That's why I don't like to use my hands for this, because I find it's a bit too sticky. But if you use a spoon, then you should get the consistency or the texture that you need. Okay. Our dough is very shaggy, it's not very solid, it's not like pizza dough or cookie dough. We want to make sure that it's soft and light, and we want to keep that moisture. So that means we need to cover it. Now you can use a towel, just make sure that it's a little bit damp or wet to cover this to keep the moisture in. You can also use this, which depending on where you live could have a very different name. We call it cling wrap, saran wrap. I think on here it's called plastic wrap. It has many different names, but it's always the same thing, just a bit of plastic. So I've already got some measured out. We take our cling wrap and we're just gonna lay it over top. So now that we have this covered, we are going to put it in a warm spot where it can just relax and rest and start to grow. We want that yeast to activate and start getting bigger. And we're gonna let it rest for a full hour. Bread is definitely a recipe that helps us to practice patience. So I will see you back here in 1 hour for the next steps. Okay, so it has been 1 full hour, and if you were wondering why I told you to get a big bowl, well, I'm gonna show you what just happened in this last hour. So let's take our wrapping off. A little bit of dough stuck. That's actually why I prefer to use the plastic rather than using a towel, because if you do get it stuck, you can just throw that out afterwards. But look at the size of this thing! It's huge! Look at it. Look at my face. It's massive. I don't know if you remember the size of this before I put the cling wrap on it, but now it is massive. Huge. Oh my gosh. It's so great. Okay, so let's get serious. We're gonna put it on the surface. So what we need to do so it doesn't stick is cover this in some flour. There's no measurement for this. You can just sprinkle some. Now that we have it on here, we're gonna just spread it out. I'm just gonna use my fingers. And look at that. Whoa. If you have a spatula, this is the best time to use it. I unfortunately do not have one. So a trick that you can do is just put flour on your hand, and that will help it not to stick so much to the dough. We're also gonna sprinkle some flour on top of the dough just to help because it's very sticky. Now it's time to get both hands dirty. Let's get some more flour. And we don't need to knead it, we just need to start shaping this into a ball. So we want to push it, fold it. So I'm folding, which means to take it and fold it into the center. Fold it into the center. It doesn't need to be perfect. When we start to do this, helps us bring it into the ball shape. Where we folded it, this is called the seam. You can, like a seam in your shirt, where the stitches are, this is where the dough comes together. The prettier side's on the other one. So this is my dough. Now is when you need your second bowl. So this bowl, I don't want my dough to get stuck to here, because again, we saw how sticky it can get. Even though it has flour on it now, it can still get a little bit sticky. So we're gonna take oil and just put it everywhere inside. Don't worry that your hands are dirty, doesn't matter. So just about a tablespoon of oil. We want to make sure that all the sides, we saw how big it gets, so we want to make sure that all the sides have oil on them. Okay, once you're happy with how oily it is, you're going to take some flour and dust it, so very light with the flour. Okay, so now it's oiled and floured. We are going to put this into the bowl seam side up. So another thing that it might say in a recipe is to transfer it. So we pick up our dough and flour. So now we have our dough in here. And guess what we're gonna do? We're gonna let it rest. Just use the same cellophane wrap or cling wrap. You can also, again, use a damp towel, whatever you have, just to try to keep the air out of here and keep the moisture locked inside. While this is resting, we want to rest it for another 45 minutes. We need to preheat the oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit or 230 degrees Celsius. It's been 45 minutes, so it's finally time to take out the Dutch oven and we're gonna put this dough inside of it. Okay, so we flour our surface, and again, we're going to take this bubbly jiggly thing and we're just gonna dump it out. And we probably need some more flour. Sprinkle some on top. And again, just like before, we're gonna pull our edges towards the center. We wanna make sure we're getting that nice ball. We're not kneading. This is a no need to do that. We just wanna make it a nice sort of shape. You can even stretch it and pull it towards the center. If it's sticky, just add a bit more flour to it. When I'm happy with it, just gonna flip it and shape it. If you take your hands, the side you can. Okay, so this is our dough. The final step, now it's time to take the Dutch oven out of the oven. So now that we have this very, very hot Dutch oven, we don't want to touch it. We're just going to drop this into there, but the dough is going to break. So we need to cut a seam in it. Okay, very, very careful. We drop it inside. Try to aim for the center. Now that our dough's in here, we haven't burnt our hands. We're gonna put the lid back on and we're going to bake it in the oven for 20 minutes covered. And then after 20 minutes, we'll take off the lid. Ta-da! beautiful that is? Ooh. So this is our finished no knead bread. You can check, if you're not sure if it's done, you can check this by flipping it. Again, it's really hot. Flip it to its side, and you're just gonna tap on the bottom. And if it sounds hollow, then it should be done. So that is finished. I hope you try this recipe at home. As you can see, it's getting darker outside. It's definitely not a fast recipe, but you feel pretty proud. At least I feel pretty proud when I've made my own bread. So I hope that you give it a try and let me know how it turns out. I would love for you to tag me in pictures or in a video on Instagram. Make sure to follow me and tag me in it because I would love to see how your bread turned out. I'm gonna let this rest and then I'll show you the final product afterwards because it's delicious, but even with just a bit of butter.